How do I put it? I was taken by surprise. Maggie, my spouse, had just dropped a huge bombshell on me, actually, 2 huge bombshells. She said, "Mac, we need to talk," as soon as I got home from work. She was still wearing the business suit she had worn to her accounting job. I was wearing my coveralls from when I was managing my chocolate company. Margaret Sullivan McDougall is my wife, and my name is Angus Max McDougall. It's true that she hyphenates her last name, it seems a bit pretentious, but whatever. Maggie is her name. She is of Irish descent, and I am Scottish. It should have been obvious from the start that we weren't a good fit, but her golden blonde hair, green eyes, and amazing body instantly won me over. We had started college together 10 years prior, right after I had left the army. I was 22 and she was 18. She was going for the aforementioned accounting degree, of course, and I was using the GI Bill to pursue a degree in culinary arts. Strangely enough, we clicked. I wanted to make chocolate cookies, candy, and pretty much anything chocolate because I knew she was a chocolate connoisseur. Actually, a lot of women had a thing about chocolate, including my mom. There was constant demand for chocolate, making it a seller's market. While Christmas is the season when most businesses see the most growth in sales, chocolatiers can profit on Valentine's Day, Easter, Independence Day, and other occasions throughout the year. Demand for chocolate is evenly split between Valentine's Day and Christmas, with my small chocolate factory doing better business on Valentine's Day than it does on Christmas Day most years. I detest my first name, Angus, too. Did you really have to go name me Angus, Mom? I say hello to everyone as Mac. Not even my spouse calls me Angus. All right, my parents call me Angus, but only when they're upset with me. I'm Mac every other time. Maggie had just informed me that a conversation was necessary. I instantly tensed up, because those 4 words mean exactly what every guy on the planet knows when they're put together in a sentence. Fearful of it, we know it. Since the beginning of time, "we need to talk" has been the precursor to breakups and divorces. So I sat down at the table and looked at her, filled with a sense of impending doom. I knew that everything in my world was going to fall apart. 8 of their 10 years together were spent in happy marriage. Well, my marriage had been happy. I had thought the same thing about Maggie. I quickly went over the reasons why she might say what she was about to say. Sexual? Not in a way. We regularly had sex, often 4 or 5 times a week, and our sessions were usually marathons. I managed to get her off several times that would have shaken the earth. Our sexual life was wonderful. Cash? Unlikely. I was making 6 figures a year, or nearly $250,000 after taxes, overhead, and employee payroll were taken care of. We were getting along great. Our annual income as a couple was very nearly $375,000. We were not in pain. Absence of affection? Not in my opinion. I had the utmost affection for her. Had she, at some point along the way, grown tired of me? Hell, a week ago, we had only been discussing the possibility of becoming parents. I sat down at the kitchen table, but she interrupted my reverie by pushing the dreaded manila envelope across to me. "Maggie, please tell me this isn't what I think it is." Her face was a studded mask that revealed nothing when I looked at her. With a soft voice, she apologized to Mac. "I should have talked to you before, but I want a divorce." "Why?" I asked, sounding far more composed than I actually felt at the time. "It's intricate," she tempered, averting her gaze. "You met someone else?" Since I still hadn't gone into a rage, I must have been in shock. "Yes," she uttered even fewer, hardly audible words. "How long?" I inquired. What was wrong with me, God? I should have been pacing back and forth, standing there fuming, calling her anything but a divine child. I ought to have been intimidating the man she was exchanging me for. Something other than complete numbness was what I should have felt. 8 months, the woman uttered. I shut my eyes. 8 months, I said once more. You've been cheating on me for 8 months, and the first I hear about it is that you want a divorce. I gave a shrug. I guess you're going to drag me to court because in California, it's not good to alienate someone you love. Here, I have very little options left. No, Mac, she uttered while slowly shaking her head. Your company is mine, not yours. I inherited the house from my grandparents, but you have a few days to move out once you secure housing of your own. Naturally, until I get married again, I'll be asking for marginal alimony for a while. Not particularly extravagant, though. I exhaled. Do I know him? I questioned for a long time. She said needlessly, you'll go to jail if you hurt him in any way. I didn't want to lose business, but I also didn't want to beat him up. I am aware of that. However, I shrugged, thinking I had a right to know who's been horning in on me for the last 8 months. Reginald Pennington, she uttered while maintaining an upright head. Son of a. That, my friends, was the second bombshell. Before this, I already detested him. All right, I was furious now. I calmed myself by closing my eyes and inhaling deeply. Pennington, Reginald. Blonde, blue-eyed, exorbitantly wealthy from the old money. Oh, and incredibly snobbish with a mile-wide racist and bigoted streak as well. After we had dinner together to talk about some of the charities we were all involved with at the time, I had warned Maggie about him. She told me he was harmless and laughed at my warning. Yes, exactly. As safe as a rattlesnake. Even at the charity function where we first met, I wasn't comfortable with the way he was staring at Maggie. His eyes were filled with pure desire as he cast scornful glances at me and her. I could barely contain my rage as I looked Maggie in the eyes once more. Well, I guess there's not much I can do about it then, I shrugged as casually as possible. She said, I wish it hadn't come to this, Mac, with a dejected smile that I knew was fake. She merely wanted to make me feel better. But I saw right through it for what it was. Mac, that isn't true, I stated calmly. Now my mind was working on a strategy, but whatever. As long as the divorce is what you say it is, I won't argue against it. Before I sign the documents, I'll have my lawyer review them, you know. She gave a nod. I wouldn't anticipate any less. Just so you know, nothing you did or did not do was the cause of it. I felt an instant soul connection with Reginald. Though I'm in love with him, I truly do love you. Mac, I truly apologize if things have to be this way. What a waste of time. His family has billion-dollar fortunes, so she fell in love with his money. He danced too close to Maggie the night of the charity ball we'd attended, and I saw him straightening up as she was making her way back to our table. He didn't have enough to satisfy her in bed, and I knew that for a fact. Until he adjusted it, I nearly missed the fact that he had a hard-on underneath his tight slacks. Maggie was trading way down from my beast, at least in terms of size, and I had to laugh, as I did then. But I just said, I'm sorry too, not wanting to upset anyone just yet. She gave me the manila envelope after their brief conversation. Mac, you'll receive formal service in the morning. My attorney and I will meet at Tim's office. This is but a sneak peek at what I hope to get out of the settlement. She was talking about Tim Grayson, who has been my lawyer in everything since I started McDougal's Chocolate Factory and my best friend since elementary school. What do you know? Eliminate the alimony, and the matter is resolved. You don't need my money, do you, since Reggie is wealthy? Even though I was aware of the slim chances, she still owed me that much. She appeared to consider it. Hell, I might not even carry out the plan that had already partially developed in my mind if she went for it. No, Mac, something from all of this is needed. I did waste 10 years of my life with you, after all. No way, no way. That one sentence, that our whole marriage, our whole courtship and engagement period together, had just been a waste of her time, fired me. I arched one eyebrow as I considered the suggested alimony. For a period of 2 years or until she remarried, whichever came first, she requested $2,200 per month in alimony. That amounted to roughly half of my monthly earnings after overhead and employee payments. I had enough money saved in my personal savings account to last me for a long time. I made a show of considering it. All right. In the end, I suppose it will be worthwhile, I shrugged. I'm about to pack. Tonight, I'm heading out. I also did. Along with my clothes and toiletries, I packed my suit bag and suitcase. I also packed my huge CD collection, which contained tracks by artists like Metallica, Marty Robbins, and Mozart. Yes, it included every one of those genres. For laughs and shits, I even included some Celine Dion. I packed everything I owned into Bullet, my 1968 Mustang Fastback 390 GT, and drove off. In less than an hour, I was on my way, calling Kat on my cell phone as soon as I got behind the wheel. Hey, Mac, what's up? On the second ring, Kat responded. Kat, I got kicked out, and Tim's office is going to serve me with divorce papers in the morning. Maggie, at least in her eyes, is trading up. I finally let my bitterness come through in my voice as I snorted. Are you kidding me? She seemed just as surprised as I was. Not at all. Until I find somewhere else to stay, I'll be staying at the Holiday Inn, I answered. Oh my God, no. Mr. Man, you come over here immediately with your ass. As she puts it, she was going all ghetto on me. Despite myself, I laughed, fine, yes. All right. I'll see you when I get to. She hung up, and I couldn't help but shake my head ruefully and smile. My manager at the chocolate factory is Katrina Monroe. Though she is slightly younger and equally tall, she bears a striking resemblance to Aisha Tyler, the Nubian goddess at 6 feet. She accepts our calls and goes by Kat. Darius Jackson, her boyfriend, is a rock band guitarist, which in my opinion made him awesome. He was currently traveling and would return sometime the following week. That meant I could spend a couple of nights in Kat's guest room at her house before he returned. Hell, I might be able to stay even longer because Darius was cool with me. No, I had to get a place of my own. With what I had in the bank, I could probably buy an inexpensive house outright, but the 50-50th split on community property hadn't happened yet. Yes, it would probably take some time for me to be able to afford my own house again, so I'd have to rent an apartment. I was distracted from my thoughts when I realized I was getting close to Kat's place. Although her boyfriend was only occasionally present, he persistently pursued Kat to move in with him in Los Angeles. But Kat wouldn't move yet. She was waiting for a ring-on-the-finger kind of commitment from him. And so here I was, 32 years old, in excellent health, already a multimillionaire, but about to lose everything to the woman I had fallen in love with and married, my soon-to-be ex-wife, the gold-digging cheater. I parked my car next to Kat's little Ford Fusion as soon as I got into her driveway. That little car cowered, I swear to God, for fear of Bullet. I grinned and gave Bullet one more engine revolution before turning off the massive V8. I watched Kat open the trunk and leave wearing only a tank top and some Daisy Dukes as I reached for my suitcase. Her long, silky legs, her gorgeous round ass, and her full breast straining at the tank top all made me gasp for breath. But I quickly forced those ideas out of my mind. I shut the trunk and approached her. Kat opened the door without saying anything. Her expression was one of shock that was at odds with a number of other feelings. At this point, I think I was still in shock. Yes, that was why I was still alive, I was in shock. However, as soon as I was inside, I dropped the suitcase and fell to my knees. At last, the full extent of what had transpired began to dawn on my stunned mind. I had tried to compartmentalize everything for as long as possible, but now it all came flying out of my eyes and my mind. Kat knelt beside me, and I felt 2 long female arms go around my shoulders as great racking sobs shook my body and the tears flowed freely. I clung to her terribly, feeling that only she could keep me in this world and prevent me from sinking entirely into myself. Hey, it's all right now. Mac, you're going to be all right, she reassured. I won't, I said, shaking my head. Indeed, I was wallowing in my own misery. I freely acknowledge that. She responded by pulling my head into her full bosom, and I instantly felt loved, love from a very good friend. However, I did feel loved by someone at least. She pulled me to my feet and we went into the living room. Well, she walked and I stumbled, and then we fell into her large leather couch. When she looked at her phone, she saw a video of Darius kissing a girl that was going viral. She yelled, "You have got to be kidding me," with her mouth hanging open in disbelief while darting a dagger at her phone. I looked after her and saw Darius kissing a woman there, too, not just a casual kiss. They were playing tonsil hockey very heatedly. Is there something in the water? I pondered out loud. As I watched my marriage and Kat's relationship collapse, it was all I could think of to say. She growled, "There has to be a cheating drug in the damn water." I looked at her, and I felt uneasy because of the blaze in her deep brown eyes. "And a female Caucasian?" He claimed he doesn't even like white women, that son of a bitch. After listening to her vent to him for roughly 20 minutes, she turned to face me and started crying. I held her while she vented, returning the favor she had earlier asked of me. After she had let it all out, she gave me a bloodshot look that almost exactly matched mine. "You see us, who? Two of a kind," she sadly laughed, and I grinned while a few stray tears streamed down my cheeks as well. Well, at least Maggie did it to me in private, I thought. On national television, that bastard pulled it off. "Kat, I really apologize." "Not your fault, hun," she said, giving me a firm hug before grabbing her phone. "Excuse me while I call his cheating ass and tell him what time it is." "No problem," I said, nodding to her as she pressed the speed dial button. "Hey, Darius," she said to him. Yes, indeed, we did see the video. After Mac's cheating wife kicked him out of their home and filed for divorce, he came over. No, he will be staying with me for a few days until he finds housing of his own. No, and that's why I'm calling you, to begin with. I observed you using that hoe to play tonsil tag. She paused, rolling her eyes as she listened for a short while. She put her finger to her lips silently and pressed the speaker button so I could hear her. I understood and nodded. But I'm just having fun, baby. You know I have needs? I don't think less of her. While I'm traveling, I just need a little something something. You have to understand that, he whimpered. I no longer thought the dumb bastard belonged in the band. Well, Darius, we're done for now, she spoke with a harsh tone. I'll arrange for your belongings to be returned to your Los Angeles residence. I want nothing at all, not to see you, not to hear from you. Do you sense me? He began, but baby, with a desperate tone. When you sucked face with that hoe on national television, you lost the right to call me baby. That's not a game I play. We're done now. Completed. It's over. Put that in your mind at this very moment. Darius, goodbye. I hope it was worth it, the whore. Kat put an end to the call and blocked his number before he could complain any longer. She smirked ruefully at me as she looked at me. All right, that concludes it. No room for error. I gave a nod. There is no room for error. Kat, I concur. Second chances are not warranted for cheaters. How is she handling the divorce, then? Even if she is going to take you to the dry cleaners, don't tell me. I'll smack the blonde off her head, I swear. That one made me smile because Kat's euphemisms always made me laugh. Oddly enough, no. I'm guessing she wants $2,200 a month in alimony, so I won't try to stop her from getting married as soon as possible. I shrugged, but aside from that, I think the settlement she's offering is really fair. I had reached the acceptance stage of my divorce grieving and was completely over it. Well, acceptance was wildly inaccurate. Now that I was thinking clearly, my plan to make them pay was starting to take shape in my mind. The more I ran it through my mind, the more it felt right. Of course, it would depend on a few things, like who was providing the catering for their wedding. She must be sincere about the man, then. Is she able to identify the person? Kat inquired. Yes, this is something you're going to adore. I grinned, Reginald Pennington IV. The cat's eyes widened. I never would have taken Maggie for a gold digger. Until now, I wouldn't either. Apparently, she had everyone fooled, I shrugged. I'm pretty sure her parents forced her into it, at least a little, because they never liked me. I could never measure up to their little darling. I had to admit that for a little while there, my resentment was evident. Well, Mac, the cat said with a shrug, I see the wheels turning. What plans do you have? Cat was always able to tell when I was deep in thought. She witnessed it frequently enough when I had to find a solution in the factory or shop. Monumental retaliation, I told her, grinning placidly. Just have faith in me. They will carry that memory with them for the rest of their lives. Cat was laughing now, saying, okay, I'm almost afraid to ask what you've got so far. She let out a fit of giggles when I gave her the rundown on my basic plan. She laughed so hard that tears streamed down her cheeks. You are one crazy guy, she squealed. Okay, we need to figure out how to do this. So we did. We stayed up drinking beers and hashing out our plan of action for when the wedding would take place. We figured that in 3 months, since I wasn't going to fight the divorce, they'd get married. 1 to 6 months after that, we'd be ready. If I could remain cordial with Maggie and yes, even Reginald, I might be able to get into the wedding without crashing it. By the time I took my suitcase and bag into the guest room, it was well after midnight. I told Kat that I would be late to the shop since I had to go see Tim to sign the divorce papers in the morning, and she understood. She said she would keep everything going until I got there, or I could take the day off if I wanted. I slept surprisingly well that night. Maybe it was the beer, which we drank in moderation, or maybe it was the twisted and insidious plan I had devised to make Reginald Pennington IV and Maggie's wedding a memorable experience for them. Either way, I was happy with what we'd figured out. I was up bright and early with a smile on my face. I heard the sounds of bacon and eggs sizzling on the stove, and the scent woke me up even more. She also had a fresh pot of coffee brewing, and that was even better. I couldn't remember the last time that Maggie had cooked me breakfast, but damn it, Kat was, and we were just temporary roommates. I showered and dressed in a t-shirt and jeans since I didn't feel like going into the shop after seeing Tim. I then joined Kat in the kitchen. Good morning, Kat, I smiled as I sat down at the bar stool at her kitchen nook. Good morning, sunshine, she gave me a dazzling smile. You look a lot better this morning than when you got here last night. Thanks to you and the beer, I nodded in appreciation, which got me a musical laugh. I had to laugh too since Kat's laugh is infectious. Well, here's some eggs and bacon for you. Are you coming into work after you see Tim? She sat down the plate and a mug of coffee in front of me. Thanks, Kat. No, I think I'm going to take the day off. I don't know how I'm going to react after meeting with Maggie and her lawyer for the signing, I shrugged. Tell you what though, I'll take you to lunch later and let you know what happened. Kat nodded. You better, Mac. I'm glad I ain't going with you. If I saw that bitch, I'd probably have to smack the shit out of her. That's one reason I love you, sweetie, I grinned. You're the most loyal person I know. I love you too, boss, she smiled sweetly as I stood up and gave me a hug. Kat's only 1 inch shorter than I am, so her entire body was pressed to mine as we embraced in a hug of commiseration. Hey, both of our exes were cheating. I'm glad you're coping too, I told her as I squeezed her close, then released her. At least they weren't cheating with each other. Now that would be a cliché, she snorted a laugh, and I had to chuckle at that one. True enough. But for both of us to find out on the same day? Biggest coincidence ever, I gave her my best comic book guy impression. Kat and I both loved The Simpsons, so she got it right away and gave me a snickering laugh with a slap on the shoulder. You're right, Mac. Damn big coincidence, which makes the cheating drug in the water sound even more plausible. You and your conspiracy theories, I rolled my eyes, giving her a mirthful smile. Hey, the truth is out there, Kat gave me a spooky look. When we'd finished cleaning up and loading her dishwasher, she handed me a key to her place. It was going to go to Darius, but I think you're going to need it more than he will, she smiled. Thanks, Kat, I smiled, kissing her cheek again and hugging her tight. Don't worry though, I'll find my own place in a few days and I'll be out of your hair. No rush, Mac, she assured me. Trust me, hun, I'd rather have you around where I can keep an eye on you than have you on your own where only God knows what you would do by yourself. My parents went through a divorce, so I know how my daddy took it when Mama left him. I'm not letting you out of my sight. Okay, Mom, I smirked, and she swatted my shoulder with a cheeky smirk of her own. I'd heard about what had happened and how her mom was mentally off balance. She hadn't cheated on Kat's dad, but there were other issues with her personality and mental health that led her to alcohol and finally divorcing him. I didn't know all the details, but it wasn't as sordid as my own situation. However, her dad had taken it hard. For some background on our relationship, Kat and I had known each other for 20 years now. She's 2 years older than me, but kind of kept an eye on me in school when we were kids. Back then, I was smaller than all the other boys, so I got picked on a lot. Kat was taller than most of the boys and girls already and was well on her way to Amazon status. She stood up for me, and nobody wanted to test her. But she wasn't just reactive in that regard, she taught me how to stand up for myself. She taught me how to fight dirty since my own folks wouldn't do it. She learned young how to take care of herself. By the time we were teenagers, I had finally grown up enough that I was an inch taller than her, barely. I hit my last growth spurt during my sophomore year of high school, and Kat had stopped growing by then. She's 6 feet tall, and I'm 6 feet 1 inch, and that's where we've been ever since. We've both filled out since our beanpole days, but we're still in good shape. She was a hurdler on the track team, and I played baseball. While Kat was good enough for a scholarship to USC, I wasn't quite good enough at baseball to earn a scholarship, so instead, I joined the Army and then used my GI Bill to go to school afterward. When I started the chocolate shop just before marrying Maggie, Kat had applied for the job as manager. She had an MBA, so I snatched her up quickly. Our first year, I couldn't pay her very much, but once word of mouth spread, we had almost more business than we could handle. I managed to get some great people working for me, and Kat was, and is, the best of them. I left her in charge after a year in order to take Maggie on our belated honeymoon. Kat kept everything running smooth as silk over that 2-week period. After the first year, we were well on our way to paying off the bank loan, and I could even afford to give everyone a nice raise. By the end of the 3rd year, my shop had a miniature factory attached to it with a sizable kitchen and everything. I secured some cocoa bean contracts and managed to bring in some nice exotic blends. During our 5th year, we were sending special orders of candy all throughout California, but I steadfastly refused to go franchise or anything like that. We became damn near special order only. Though I was offered millions for my company, my employees and I refused to sell. They decided that they didn't want to work for anyone but me. If I had sold the shop, all my people would have quit. That decided it for me. I was going to keep it a small business with my 20 employees, and we were going to just have fun and make money while doing it. That, as it turned out, was the final nail in my coffin as far as my in-laws went. Maggie's father wanted to buy into my business and expand it. I politely but firmly shut him down, saying that I wanted to keep the business small with a family feel to it. He lit me up good, telling me that expansion was the only way to make serious money. I firmly and less politely pointed out that I was making some serious cash already, but that I didn't want to get greedy like him. I idly wondered what they would think of Maggie cheating on me and then divorcing me in favor of Reginald Pennington IV, and realized that I didn't care. They probably approved. Old money attracts old money, and the Sullivans, while not as affluent as the Penningtons, were still old money. Kat and I left that morning after breakfast. She went to work while I went to see Tim at his office. When I got there, Maggie hadn't shown up yet, so we shot the breeze until she arrived. When she walked in, Tim visibly tensed. I could tell by his body language that Maggie and her lawyer weren't the only ones present. I stood and turned, and sure enough, there was little Dickie Pennington himself. At that moment, I wanted nothing more than to wipe the self-satisfied smirk off his face. Instead, I ignored his offered handshake in favor of looking at Maggie. Well, let's get it over with, I shrugged. Tim went over the proposed split and everything. Since my business wasn't funded by her money or her family's money, and since the house was a gift from her folks after her grandparents died, those were not community property and were ours. My Mustang was mine, of course. I had been restoring it since high school. Tim surprised me. So you're divorcing my client in order to marry Reginald Pennington for? Is that correct, Mrs. McDougall? The question took her aback. Well, she hedged. A simple yes or no will suffice, please. Tim wasn't letting up on her. Her lawyer, a Gloria Allred wannabe, leaned over and whispered something in Maggie's ear. Yes, she said softly, looking down as if ashamed. Tim never called her Mrs. McDougall. And how soon were you planning on the nuptials? Tim went on. Now it was Maggie, Reggie boy, and Gloria Jr. in a huddle, whispering fiercely back and forth. Tim took that opportunity to lean over and whisper in my ear. Alimony? I just nodded back and smiled. He was trying to get me out of paying her a dime. When the three stooges broke their huddle, Maggie looked at Tim again. As soon as possible after the divorce is final. We've already planned most of the wedding itself. Tim nodded. And if these reports are correct, he pulled out a detailed financial report on Reggie boy. Mr. Pennington here is worth nearly $1 billion on his own, without the multiple homes and cars he owns. My question, Mrs. McDougall, is why do you want an honest, hard-working man like your husband to pay you a dime in alimony when you can just ask Mr. Pennington here for any money you wish to spend? Maggie once again got drawn into a huddle with Gloria Jr. and Reggie. Tim sent me a lightning-fast grin, and I answered back with a grin of my own while the three amigos debated their next move. When they came out of the huddle, Gloria Jr. spoke up. What would you suggest as adequate compensation, then? She asked, her stern look centered on me. Well, she can have all the furniture, not just her half. I don't care about that, I shrugged. Once more into the huddle, dear friends. The whispers were more subdued this time, but finally, they broke and looked at Tim. Agreed, the lawyer said. And so it went. I didn't have to pay alimony, but I didn't get any of the furniture either. Gloria Jr. made the necessary changes to the divorce papers, and we all signed, except for Snake Boy, and the filing took place that very day. As soon as the feminazi lawyer left, and as I was heading back to my car, Maggie and Little Dick came up to me. Angus, old boy, I hope there are no hard feelings. Once again, he actually stuck his hand out for me to shake. That did it. I took his hand and squeezed extremely hard, so that his face contorted in pain. Call me Angus again, Reginald, and I will make your life a living hell. To you, I'm Mr. McDougall. Got it? By the time I was done talking, he was on his knees, and the bones in his hand were scraping together. Yes, Mr. McDougall, let me go, please. His face had real fear on it. I released his hand before gangrene could set in, and he breathed a sigh of relief. That was for calling me Angus, I said evenly. As far as the rest goes, no hard feelings. I smiled, turned, and walked toward my car. I felt good now. I somehow got out of paying alimony and was basically free and clear of her as soon as the divorce was final. Oh, that reminded me. I walked back toward them as Maggie was helping Reginald to his feet. Maggie, before I go, I need my grandma's engagement ring back. I held out my hand. Maggie looked at me like I had just fallen off another planet. Then she took it and the wedding ring off and handed them both to me. Thanks, I smiled, nodding to them as I pocketed both rings and walked back to my car. I fired up the powerful V8, shifted it into gear, and popped the clutch. I hit the gas, and the car screeched its tires as I peeled out of the parking lot, leaving some rubber on the asphalt and some smoke in the air. It wasn't something I did often, but I wanted to send a loud and clear message to the two lovebirds. I looked in my rearview mirror and saw Reginald standing there dumbfounded, still clutching his right hand gingerly. I smirked happily as I drove toward the shop. When I got there, Kat was happy to see me, as was everyone else. They all came up and hugged me or shook my hand and told me how sorry they were. I thanked them all and told them to get back to work, however, I said it with a smile on my face, so they knew I appreciated their efforts to help me feel better. The thing was, I was feeling pretty damn good already. Besides the lawyer fees, half the court costs, and having to give up my half of the furniture I never really liked anyway, I had just managed to pull off a bloodless divorce. "Come on, Kat," I said. "Let's go to lunch." I drove us there in Bullet, and Kat loved riding in it. She could hear the rumbling of the engine under the hood and feel the power radiate from it like an aura of awesomeness. We ate and laughed, two old friends sharing our meal and our friendship in a new, solidifying bond of recently betrayed love. "I still can't believe I had absolutely no clue that she was cheating on me," I hissed, finally giving voice to my own haplessness when it came to being blind as far as Maggie had been concerned. I must have really been stupid. "No, Mac, you were in love. Love can blind us, you know." Kat smiled and reached across the table, squeezing my hand. I smiled in spite of myself. "Thanks, Kat." I squeezed her hand back, letting her know how much I appreciated all she did for me, professionally and personally. She was way more than my office manager and friend. I'd come to depend on her for a long time now, first in school when I was the little kid who was smaller than everyone else, then as the man who wanted his business to succeed and had hired her as the most eligible and best qualified of the bunch of applicants who had applied. "You never have to thank me, Mac. A nice bonus at the end of the year is thanks enough," she grinned, and I laughed outright at that. "Consider it done." I smiled and gazed into her dark brown eyes with my dark blue orbs. She looked away first, and I noticed a slight flush on her caramel-colored face. It took me aback, but I recovered quickly, even as I felt my tool start to harden. I told myself to stop it. She's my friend and she had just suffered a loss too. In all our years as friends, I had never looked at Kat that way before. Never in my life had I seen her as anything but a friend, albeit a very beautiful friend. Sure, I noticed the fact that she's a very well put-together woman, as I did the previous night at her house when I pulled in and she'd come outside to meet me. Hell, what red-blooded American male wouldn't notice a gorgeous Amazon like her? But that was just something guys do. This felt different. I realized that I wasn't ready for this, and quickly, we got back to other topics. After we'd finished lunch, I drove her back to the shop and dropped her off. She said she'd see me at home, so I drove up to the bluffs and looked out over the Pacific. I looked down at my left hand and removed my ring that had sat there for the last 8 years. I reached in my pocket and pulled out Maggie's wedding band too. I studied them both, and just the sight of them made me sick. I then pulled out my grandma's engagement ring and held all 3 of them together. I put the engagement ring back into my pocket, then hauled back and chucked the wedding bands out into the ocean as hard as possible. They glistened in the sun as they went over the bluffs and into the white water crashing into the rocks below. It was symbolic to me my marriage was dead, and that was the post-mortem. Sure, the divorce still had to play itself out, but this was what I had to do for my own sanity and to be able to move on. Now, just because I'd said the eulogy for my marriage didn't mean that I had given up on my plan to get revenge on Maggie and Reggie boy. I thought of the line from the song Violence and Bloodshed that went, "Payback's a bitch and I'm paying all." I smiled as I could hear Scott Columbus on the drums of Death and Eric Adams belting out the lyrics while Joey DeMaio laid down the bass line and Ross the Boss scorched the lead guitar. Oh yes, Reggie was going to pay for stealing my wife, and my wife was going to pay for being a gold-digging slut. Some would call me vindictive and a caveman. To those, I would just say to hell with you. Do a 20-mile road march in my boots, then judge me. 3 months later, it was all settled. Joint accounts were split 50-50. During that time, Kat and I coexisted as roomies and got along great. Nobody cared at work that we were living together. The huge surprise came when we got home one night and found the wedding invitations in the mail. Hey, Maggie hadn't been kidding, they had the wedding scheduled a month from the formal divorce decree. I grinned at Kat, and she grinned back. Okay, now it's go time, I said evilly as I drove us to Costco. Finding out the caterer for the wedding was easy. He wanted to do business with us a few months back, but it had fallen through. I decided to give him another chance and negotiate it all out myself this time around. What got me laughing a lot was that Maggie was going to wear white, as was Reggie Boy in his navy dress whites. He'd been a naval aviator back during the early days of the war while I'd been in Captain Drake's Alpha team. The dumb truck couldn't even wear a normal black tux, it seemed. I paid a visit to the caterer a few nights before the wedding and replaced the chocolate cake mix with my own special blend. I grinned like a Cheshire cat as I swapped out the cake mix with something extra. No, it wasn't poison, it was just something that would make Maggie and Reggie Boy's wedding pretty damned unforgettable for everyone involved. Now, what I was doing could be compared to a high school prank, only done with a lot more style. But damn it, I had to get some back. They'd hung the horns on me for 8 months before blindsiding me with the divorce papers. Granted, she had been very conciliatory in the divorce, and I was left with just a broken heart. However, that broken heart was going to cost them. I kept Kat apprised of what was going on, and she laughed hard when I told her that Operation Mudflap was a go. The invitation included the reception, which was where the real entertainment would begin. The morning of the wedding, Kat and I showered simultaneously, and no, we didn't shower together. Although in the past several months we had grown closer, we were still gun-shy about relationships, and I, for one, was worried about ruining our friendship by taking it to the next level. I'm just glad that she had those tankless water heaters installed. When I was dressed in my Armani suit, I waited in the living room until Kat was ready. "Well, am I presentable?" she asked as I was watching a UCLA football game. My mouth dropped to the floor as I turned to face her. It would be hard to describe the vision of loveliness that was before me, but I will try. Kat was dressed in an emerald green gown that fit her curves perfectly. The shiny substance clung to her body as though it was infatuated with it and didn't want to be parted from it. Her gorgeous face was perfectly framed by her shoulder-length hairstyle. Her lips were applied in a seductive shade of red, and her green eyeshadow complemented her dress exquisitely. She was exactly the same height as me because she was wearing 1-inch pumps. Her toned legs were on full display, and the dress made them look amazing. The top of her dress barely covered her ample bust, and I caught a glimpse of her caramel-colored back as she spun around. "My goodness, you look so beautiful," I exclaimed as soon as my speech came together. She flashed a radiant smile. "Many thanks, Mac. You yourself appear pretty damn good." At that one, I turned pink. I said, "Thanks, Kat," and we walked out the door. We went to the church by car. Paradoxically, as Bullet pulled into the parking lot, Billy Idol's White Wedding was coming on the radio. When the large V8 signaled our arrival, people turned and stared. Other than us, every visitor was an old money from the upper classes. All right, this was going to be even more enjoyable than I had imagined. We presented our invitations to the door bouncer. All right, maybe calling him a bouncer is being too kind. He appeared to be one of Reggie Boy's no-neck security goons who escorted him to public events. The Penningtons' business practices appear to have earned them some enemies over the years, which is why the no-necks are required. I was not at all surprised by that. According to their interpretation of the Golden Rule, Reggie Boy's family follows the principle of do unto others before they do it to you. Alternatively, it might be that he who hath the gold makes the rules. And I felt even more optimistic about what was going to happen this fine day, judging by the looks of contempt that Kat and I were receiving from the snobbish elite. I leaned over to Kat as we were settling into our seats in the pew and said, "Remember not to eat anything chocolate at the reception." At that, she giggled softly and gave me a quick kiss on the cheek. It was a typical Catholic wedding service, long and dull. Whatever, I had to fight a few times to avoid falling asleep. It's true that Reggie looked handsome in his Navy uniform, which is another reason to detest the turd. Before giving up his commission to start a business with his family, he served as a Navy officer. While he awaited Maggie's entrance down the aisle, his Annapolis class ring twinkled and shone brightly. And now, with her snobby-ass father at her side, the wedding march started to play. I thought back to our wedding, and how he had looked at me with a frown the whole time. But now that his sweet little daughter was at last getting married to someone of her own station, he was beaming with pride. I wanted to hit the *** hole in the face, but I held back. The full amount would be paid at the reception. Thus, it proceeded. I won't waste your time on the uninteresting specifics of the wedding vows that she didn't take seriously the first time, or the ring exchange that she showed off during her affair, or really anything else. As we arrived at the reception, I congratulated them both, and that's when I won the Best Actor Oscar, Emmy, Tony, and Golden Globe all at once. Since Kat had loved Maggie like a sister and had seen her betrayal of me as a betrayal of everyone who worked for me, Kat would have won Best Actress. Another one of Reg's slaps in the face. Angus, old boy, I hope there really are no hard feelings. The superior man ultimately prevailed. It was all I could do not to beat him up, break his elbows, knees, and testicles, and make his plastic surgeon a very wealthy man with a full face workup. Rather, I responded, "You're right." After saying, "The better man did win," I grabbed a somewhat shocked Kat and gave her a passionate kiss. Kat froze for a moment, then eagerly kissed me back. I put my lips and tongue to Kat's claim right there, in front of Maggie and Reggie. It was the most amazing first kiss ever. Our tongues duelled and then slowly danced, briefly obliterating everything around us. Her fingers swept through my hair and she wrapped her arms around my neck. Kat turned to face Maggie and Reggie as we broke the kiss. She winked and said, "Yeah, the best man really did win," leaving the delighted couple staring at each other with gaping mouths. We grinned together as we ate dinner of lobster after taking our designated seats. It was really, really good. The wedding cake was then wheeled out, and that's when the real fun began. Maggie and Reggie performed the ceremonial cake in face and ceremonial cake cutting for the two of them. People went up to get a piece of cake for themselves after everyone had laughed. It was going to be an incredible show, so we opted to wait until the end of the line. As expected, chaos broke out as soon as we reached the cake itself. Of all people, it began with the bride farting. It was a ripper, too, audible from across the dining hall, not just a soft poot. The groom himself responded with a thunderous ripper. I gave them a quick glance and loudly said, "You're excused," which made the snobbish elite around me giggle. Yeah, but they weren't going to be saved. Then a gurgling sound escaped Maggie's lips, and an expression of sheer horror flashed before it. When Reginald smelled something bad, his face twisted up and he let out a gurgling sound from his ass. As more farts and gurgles from the other guests arose, they exchanged horrified looks. Maggie and Reggie boy were sprinting around, and I could see brown liquid leaking from under her dress onto the ground. Reggie was then attempting to cover up the brown smear that was spreading across the back of his white dress pants. Realizing they had just soiled themselves, more guests quickly joined them as they made a mad dash for the restrooms. Quickly and quietly, Kat and I headed out, and when our laughter reached a breaking point, we were sitting in Bullet. We were laughing so hard that we almost burst out laughing, and we were both crying. "Oh my God, Mac," Kat exclaimed, clutching her stomach in response to her gasp. Like she was laughing, "So was I. Do you believe I overused?" I said in between fits of crying laughter. "How quickly does that operate?" She chuckled once more. "Well, it worked well, according to the Costco boxes, but don't use too much of it." When our laughter finally subsided a little, I laughed. She questioned, looking surprised, "How many boxes did you pour into the cake mix?" "Everyone," I said with a calm smile, making Kat nearly burst out laughing once more. I had taken a laxative with a chocolate flavoring and mixed it with cake mix that the caterers had saved for the Pennington wedding. I replaced most of the cake mix boxes with the powder, so the cake and cupcakes were practically like pure laxatives. To ensure it wouldn't be overly strong, I had also mixed some with the regular cake mix, but holy cow, I didn't think it would work so quickly. That merely served as the cherry on top. I had supposedly gone to the caterer that night to work out a deal with him for the chocolate that my factory produced. A few months ago, he had gotten in touch with me, and I had promised to get back to him. I informed him that a few team members falling ill had caused a slight backlog, but once we were back up and running, I was able to bring him some samples. His eyes were filled with greed as he anticipated receiving what he desired from me. During his tour of the facility, he showed me the kitchen and mentioned that they were providing catering for the wedding in Pennington. Of course, I already knew, but he was unaware that the bride was actually my cheating, gold-digging ex-wife. After I made a show of being polite, he told his staff to close for the day and returned to his office. He shook my hand, then said he would draft the contract's documentation and get back to me and Tim when it was done. Still, I believe that in the days that followed the actual wedding, he must have completely forgotten about that agreement. I left his office as soon as everyone had left. Headed for the kitchen's back door, propped it open, and drove around. I took the powdered chocolate laxative instead of the powdered cake mix and walked out. I checked that the kitchen door was securely fastened and that none of the boxes I had brought with me had been left behind. When I was in, one thing Captain Drake taught us was to never leave a trace. What a nice guy. He had resigned his commission and was teaching history at UCLA when I last heard. Nothing could link me to the extremely flimsy cake by the wedding day because all the proof had vanished. The plan was only known to Kat and me, and she was keeping quiet. Kat gave me a serious look when we returned to our place. "That kiss earlier, Mac," she began. "I know I was acting inappropriately, but you looked so amazing that I couldn't help myself," I blurted to Kat. She touched my lips with a finger. "Baby, let me finish," she uttered. "It was the best damn kiss I've ever had, that one earlier. For a white boy, you're a damn fine man. I'm attempting to convey that I believe we would work well together." She was starting to flush a little. I gently leaned in to give her a kiss. We made eye contact, and she opened her mouth to take my tongue. As we shared a passionate kiss, I couldn't help but feel as though I had been missing out on something wonderful for a very long time. When our mouths finally parted, we met eyes to eyes. We would make a good team, in my opinion. There's only one way to find out. I grinned, and she grinned in return. We resumed our slow kissing once inside. I kissed her and slipped the straps of her dress off her shoulders. We had a great time making love. Some may wonder why I chose the arrangement I did for the caterer. The issue was that the proprietor had made a move on Kat when she had initially visited to discuss matters with him when he had initially expressed interest in cooperating with us. When he got too fresh, she slapped him upside the head, then returned and said we shouldn't do business with him. When they were revealed as the caterers for the Pennington wedding, things started to change because I realized I could sort of get two birds with one stone. The press dubbed it the Brown Wedding, and the fallout was immediate. The following day, it was featured on news channels and in newspapers, with amazing photos and videos showing the bride, groom, and guests scurrying out of the dining hall to use the restrooms. We watched the festivities at Kat's house with all the guys and girls from the shop. Everyone knew we'd been there, even though none of the scenes featured us. The snobbish elite ran for the restrooms like their asses were about to explode, and we all laughed so hard we started crying. It goes without saying that the pictures showing them fighting to prevent the brown stuff from ruining the place too much embarrassed a lot of upper-class snobs. I felt sorry only for the janitors who had to deal with the aftermath of all that mess. Naturally, a week or so following the wedding disaster, the police showed up to pose questions. Although Kat and I had gone to the wedding, we both claimed that we left because we were concerned for our own safety during the storm. During our interviews, we maintained our composure and only burst out laughing once the detectives had left. They never got back to us. The caterer was sued by Reggie Boy, but instead of paying the settlement, the caterer fled the nation. When we last heard from him, he had left for his native Italy. I'm not sure what transpired with him thereafter. Less than a year after the marriage, Reginald Pennington IV was discovered having an affair with the wife of another man. By whom was he caught? Her husband, who did not treat Reggie Boy very well. When Maggie arrived at the offended husband's house after he called her, she had a few choice words to say to Reggie. Not long afterward, Maggie was at our new home's doorstep. In the ensuing altercation, Reginald at least managed to lose a testicle. She didn't seem to mind deceiving herself, but she wouldn't tolerate her husband doing the same against her. It's almost like a double standard, don't you think? Yes, Kat's tiny two-bedroom apartment was simply too small, so we moved into a bigger one. Our new home was a four-bedroom ranch style, which by the end of the first year, I had halfway paid off. Maggie appeared to have been forced to sign a prenuptial agreement by Reggie Boy, which stated that all Maggie would receive in the event of a divorce was what she had contributed to the union. Her $125,000 a year job remained, but that was it. Maggie Sullivan doesn't need billions. The next year, we heard a knock on the door late at night. I quickly planted a kiss on Kat, who was for months pregnant, and leaped up to take hold of the door. When I answered the door, Maggie was crying. "Maggie, what do you want?" I asked in an impartial manner. "I apologize, Mac. I apologize for everything," she cried. I shrugged and said, "Hey, you were the one who wanted to trade up. What took place?" She blurted out, "I caught Reginald cheating on me," as her tears got even deeper. "Whoa, what a rough break," I remarked in jest. "Mac, I apologize deeply." I wanted to know if there was any possibility. She interrupted herself to look at a pregnant cat approaching from behind me. "Who's that, baby?" As Kat walked up beside me, I heard her ask. She gave Maggie a smile. Saying, "It's Maggie," and she was just leaving, I shut the door in my former partner's face. I threw away the deadbolt and embraced Kat. She represents the past. My future lies with you. Sweetheart, you are loved. She planted a kiss on me and said, "I love you too, baby." Shortly after learning that Kat was pregnant, which was her idea, we were married in a small civil ceremony. She's still one of my closest friends and my manager at the shop. I cherish my spouse. Please feel free to express your opinions in the space provided for comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.